it was more exciting to me than, oh my God, this is a horrible thing that's going to destroy our lives and our world.
It was exciting. The revolution was exciting as a Christian in Iran?
Something sailed through our living room window, smashed the glass, and landed next to my feet. And what it was a glass bottle with a burning rag stuffed into it and a note on it that said, "Die, Christian scum."
Okay.
It didn't explode because my dad jumped there, pulled out the rag, and threw it right back out.
I had a great time while Molotov cocktails were being thrown into my dinner. My God.
Like I said, I was 11 years old, man.
See, I gotta tell you, Nicky, this is why I love talking to people about where they're from. Hi, everybody. This is Dan and Dante. Welcome to another episode of Middle Age Mess, the show for people who grew up with toys that were at least 80% lead. All right, today, I got to tell you, I'm kind of excited because I don't have to do anything today. I have the self-proclaimed world's best podcast guest, Nicky Billou. Nicky, how you doing?
Danny, I'm blessed. I'm grateful. Thanks for having me on the show. It's exciting to be here.
I'm excited to have you on because I don't have to do anything for the next 35 minutes. I'm just going to let you roll, be the best podcast guest of all time, and I'm going to get like millions of views. I'm so excited. This is a big time.
Brother, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's rock and roll.
Okay, let's do it. All right, so I've read about you a little. You know, I see the thought leader stuff. I see the books that you've done, seminars. You've done a lot of stuff. I don't care about that quite yet. First, I want to know who you are, how you grew up, how you evolved into the person you are sitting in front of me today. So where are you from?
I'm actually originally an immigrant from the Middle East. I'm a Christian from Iran, believe it or not.
Okay, got it. And when did you come to, well, you live in Canada though, right?
I do.
Okay, when did you come to Canada?
I was just shy of my 15th birthday. So here's how it all happened. When I was 11 years old, the Islamic Revolution took place in Iran, right? And that was
So you were born in 1968?
67.
67, okay, got it.
So 78 is when the revolution started. 79 is when it culminated with the Shah leaving the country.
Right.
At the time, right, I was a kid. So, you know, it was more exciting to me than, oh my God, this is a horrible thing that's going to destroy our lives and our world.
It was exciting. The revolution was exciting as a Christian in Iran? I mean, you should have been fucking terrified, I would imagine.
I wasn't. I had my friends. I had my life. You know, some crazy shit happened. I mean, looking back at it, I should have probably been terrified, but I wasn't. I mean, there was a day where something sailed through our living room window, smashed the glass, and landed next to my feet. And what it was a glass bottle with a burning rag stuffed into it and a note on it that said, "Die, Christian scum." And what it was
and who cares? Yeah, I had a great time while Molotov cocktails were being thrown into my dinner. My God. Okay.
It didn't explode.
Yeah.
Because my dad jumped there, pulled out the rag, and threw it right back out.
I love your dad. I love him. Oh my God.
He was a stud. God rest his soul. And you know, shortly after all this stuff started to happen.
But wait, hold on. Let's just focus on that incident for a second. How could you not be scared? How could you not be scared?
Like I said, I was 11 years old, man. I mean, we grew up in a very, how can I put it? Iranian culture is a masculine culture, especially back then. You know, kids were tough. At 11, I'd get into fights with 18-year-olds who kind of insulted my religion.
Oh my God, I mean? That's awesome. Shit, I think you might be the world's best podcast guest, Nicky. I love you already. Okay, so you didn't really care, or because you were so young, you didn't realize the implications. More likely.
No, I didn't. That really is more what it was. Because looking back now, if someone threw a Molotov cocktail through my window now, I'd be scared shitless.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this stuff starts happening to Christians and Jews. There was a lot of Jews in Iran who had to leave as well. So what happened with your family? Like, what did your dad say to you? What was your understanding? What was going on?
So here's what he said to us. He said, look, we're going to need to leave for a while, but we'll come back. That's what he said. But what was really going on is him and my mom were talking and saying, we got to get the hell out of here. Yeah. And we got to get the kids out of here. So I have two brothers. In August of 1980, like literally exactly 1 month before the Iran-Iraq war started, we left Iran for Greece. My mom, my two brothers, and I. Dad stayed behind for a while. A couple of years later, he joined us. I mean, he came back and forth to Greece. So we were in Greece for 2 years. and Greece was a way station until we got to Canada.
So were you refugees? Were you like, what
No,
was your status?
our status in Greece
Yeah.
was tourist visa.
Perfect. You know, you went to see the Acropolis every day for 2 years. That's not so bad. It's
No,
okay.
we went to school there. We went to a school called the Hellenic International School, which was then bought by TASIS, the American school in Switzerland, and became TASIS Greece.
Let me ask, did your family have a
Mom
little
and Dad rented an apartment for us.
did you guys have like a little bit of money so you were okay, or
We
were
had a
you
bit of money. Yeah,
Okay.
we had a bit of money.
Got it.
Dad was successful.
Okay.
Dad was successful. So we're there. We're going to school in Greece. Mom's, looking after everything. Every few months, she had to go talk to the Greek authorities and beg and persuade them to let us stay because we were in school and all of that. So we were spending money in Greece. The Greeks at the time were fine with that.
Right.
But she was attempting to get us out of Greece and into North America, and she decided to take us to Canada.
And why North America? Why was that the ultimate goal, if you know?
We had family and friends in. We had family in the U.S., not in Canada at the time. We had friends in Toronto, and it was a free society. Being a Christian was not a negative at the time, anyways. I mean, right now that's not necessarily true anymore, but it was definitely not a negative at the time. They wanted us to be safe and be able to live life, grow up.
So can I ask, so when you were growing up in Iran, the first 10 years under the Shah, there really was no religious persecution. It was a fairly free and open society at the time, wasn't it?
Buddy, by the standards of the Middle East, it was paradise.
Right. No, because I've seen all sorts of things. Now, the Shah, from what I hear, and I don't know, was a fairly repressive guy and stole a lot of the country's resources, blah, blah, blah.
That's all bullshit. That's all bullshit.
Okay.
Total bullshit. Look, by the standards of the Middle East, he was an absolute open-minded, forward-thinking guy. By the standards of the West and progressives here in the West who think that anybody who's anything less than their vision of perfection is a fascist or a tyrant, then he wasn't. But those guys are idiots. They don't know what the hell they're talking about to begin with. The Shah was a man who took his country kicking and screaming from the 7th century and dragged it into the 20th. Iranian income under the Shah quadrupled 4 times. So it went up 16-fold. Wow. 16-fold. Women in Iran under the Shah's regime had more rights than any country in the Middle East, including Israel at the time. Wow. Including Israel. The Shah had engaged in a massive land reform program. They called it the White Revolution, where he took land from the aristocracy, the majority of which were the mullahs, and he gave it to poor farmers. So he basically turned a class of serfs into a class of, successful little capitalists.
See, I got to tell you, Nicky, this is why I love talking to people about where they're from, because I learned so much during the part where my guests come on and tell me about their lives and where they grew up and all the things they did than I do ever in talking about what they do. So I actually never knew that. I heard from my vantage point as a kid growing up in Los Angeles that the Shah was this horribly repressive guy. He stole all the country's money. He hid it in Switzerland or whatever. And when the Muslims came in, it was really to free the country from his repressive rule. Yeah, exactly.
That's a joke. No, man. The reason the mullahs came in is because he took their land away from them and they wanted to get rid of them and get their land back and get into power.
Wow.
Trust me, people in Iran were a million times better off financially, freedom-wise, under the regime of the Shah. The Shah had a plan to make Iran one of the top 5 or 6 powers on the planet, and he was well on his way there. Iran had massive oil wealth, and it was being spent primarily for the benefit of the people. Now, he was the Shah of the country. He was the king. Trust me that he wasn't a pauper. He took money for himself as well. But as the ruler of the country, by the standards of the Middle East, he didn't take all that much.
All right. We're going to have another podcast later. We're going to talk about nothing but Iran because I think it's really interesting. But let's get back to you. All right. So now your parents get you into Canada. Did you speak English?
Yep. We went to an American school in Iran, and we learned to speak English early on. So, yes.
Discrimination in Canada, bias. The Canadians are so goddamn nice. Maybe there wasn't any. Maybe they just accepted you.
From 1982 to now, I've experienced discrimination exactly 3 times. 3 times.
Now I want to hear
And
about the 3
in, in,
times.
in Iran, I experienced discrimination for being a Christian and an ethnic Assyrian 6 times a day.
Yeah. So what were the 3 times? I just out of curiosity, I'm sure it's not a big deal, but a Molotov cocktail thrown in your car on Queen Street or
No,
no?
no. One was in 1982. There was a drunk kind of hoser. That's what we call kind of
Right.
native born Canadians,
Totally.
white Canadians. He was drunk and he was yelling and screaming at a Pakistani guy and calling him, you know, Paki this and Paki that. And I looked at him and he started calling me the same thing. This was in 1983, 84. In 2000 and some dude in a pickup truck, again, a hoser, just looked at me and called me a Saddam Hussein lookalike.
He might not have been that wrong, I got to tell you. It was kind of, I mean, there is a little resemblance there.
I don't know about that, brother. Especially back then, I didn't have a beard and a mustache.
Yeah,
So,
no, I got you.
and then in the court system, when I went through my divorce, my ex's lawyer just was a total bitch. My ex is not the bitch; the lawyer was.
Yeah, yeah. I know that bitch. She also represented my ex-wife.
She wrote up the case against me in such a way to make it look that I was from Iran and I was a flight risk to take my sons, run away from the country and go back to Iran, and use that to get the cops to get the cops involved.
Oh,
It was
wow.
disgusting. It was a lie, and it was the only serious repercussion of racism. So this lawyer was a racist, and the court system was racist toward me for being a man, was actually sexist toward me for being a man, and a racist toward me for being a Middle Eastern man, because I may be a flight risk and go back home. And the interesting thing was, if at the time, if this wasn't a thing back in 2009 when all this went down, but if it was happening today, they'd go on my social media and they'd see that I'm, you know, pro-police, pro-Canada, conservative, Christian, all that stuff that would have let them know that. And I'd written a lot of screeds against the Iranian government.
Yeah.
The idea of me going back to Iran was like ridiculous. My ex knew this, they knew this, but the lawyer said, yeah, we're not going to say that. We're going to say it this way to help get you a leg up in court.
So,
and at the beginning it worked, but you know, eventually the truth came out.
So 2 times you're discriminated against because they thought you were the wrong person, a Paki and an Iraqi. And the 3rd time it was a lawyer who'll eat their own babies to make a couple extra dollars. That doesn't count.
And the court system. And the court system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Court system was messed up.
Okay.
I mean, they bought into her lies. That again should be another conversation you have about how the court systems are against men. And frankly, the court system, the justice systems are against minorities. They will take those stereotypes and it'll go harder on you if you're a minority. Now that in Canada has changed a little bit, but up until about 6 or 7 years ago, that's how it was.
I got it. So now we got 2 more podcasts we're going to do together. So this is the first of a 3-part series. Okay, so you basically, then you grew up as like a Western life. And from the time you were 12, 13 years old, you were in Western countries and speaking English and living like a Westerner.
More or less, yeah.
Okay.
More or less.
So now we are, again, I read your bio. I'm not exactly sure what you are. What are you? Are you a thought leader? Are you a writer? What do you do?
All of the above. But before I get to all that, let me just fill in one more blank because I think it's relevant.
Okay.
When I came to the West, I wasn't happy. I did not want to come here because mom and dad basically fibbed to us to not, you know, have us cause them too much trouble. They said, we're going to go back. They had no intention of taking us back. And after a couple of years, when that became obvious to me, I was really pissed. I mean, I was angry. I was upset. My brothers were as well. We were holy terrors to our parents for that.
But by then, didn't you recognize like what was going on with the Muslim Revolution?
It doesn't matter. They lied to us. Basically, they lied to us.
I understand.
Kids are not very forgiving of that.
Yeah, I got it.
You know, at the time. But slowly, over time, I could see how incredible Canada was, how phenomenal it was to get to live in a free country, to get to say what's on my mind, to get to call the prime minister whatever I wanted to and not be worried about being hauled off to jail in the middle of the night, you know, and to be able to like choose which path I wanted to go into in terms of a career path. in Iran, being a Christian means there's certain career paths that are closed off to you. That's not the case in Canada. I also was introduced by a good friend of mine to a writer, to an incredible writer named Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're familiar with her work.
Of course.
Yeah. So I read The Fountainhead, which I really enjoyed, but I read Atlas Shrugged at a seminal moment in my life. I was in university and I was working on a paper, and I started reading Atlas Shrugged when I wasn't working on the paper. I got so engrossed in it and its message that I slept 1 hour that week. All I did was work on the paper, read the book, go to the gym, and eat. I slept an hour the whole week, and I mean,
sounds like a typical college. Sounds like a typical college student schedule, to be honest with you. But
sure, but you got to get. I read that book. I was 20 years old at the time, and most 20-year-olds in university are progressive, liberal, leftist. I became like an Ayn Randian libertarian conservative. And it was shocking to some of my professors who knew me before all of this kind of synthesized itself in my brain. And they're looking at me as being this polite Persian guy who then is the one guy who gets up in class whenever someone says something leftist or progressive and just hardcore, like goes at them and fights with them in class. And some of my professors loved it, even though they disagreed with me.
Right.
A couple of my professors hated it and punished me for it with respect to the marks that they gave me. And the one fellow who did that, I just lost my shit at him. And I said, listen, you're grading me based on the fact that you disagree with me politically. And I told him, this ain't going to stand. I'm going to get the grade that I deserve. And if this doesn't get turned around, I'm going to get you kicked out of here, tenure or no tenure. I don't give a shit.
Jesus Christ, Nicky, I'm never going to cross you, Nicky. I'm never going to cross you. Whatever you want, you got it, as far as I'm concerned.
But you got to understand, right? Like in university, these professors are used to, having kids defer to them and
subservient. Yeah, of course.
Be subservient.
Yeah.
But that's not how I was raised. Like I was raised in Iran to be able to, stand up for myself, especially because a lot of the time we get into fights just because we were Christian and kids were there to bang us. So this guy had no idea he was dealing with a guy who was not going to put up with the shit. He himself, did not commit to changing the grade. What he did say was that he would not teach the second half of the class. I'd be taught by his TA, and I could take it up with the TA. And I thought, okay, let's have a chat with this TA. So I had a chat with the TA, and I went to the TA, and I told him, look, your professor is a dirtbag, and the only reason he gave me this mark is because he disagrees with me politically. I want to know if you're going to treat me fairly, because if you're not, this is not going to go well. I'm going after him. I'll go after you. I'll do whatever I got to do to get the mark that I think is fair and that I deserve, not a political mark. And the guy just looked at me and he said, don't worry, man, I'm not as crazy as he is.
What grade did you get? What grade did you ultimately get?
I got an A.
There you go.
That's what I deserved. It's what I deserved. The guy gave me a C+, not because my work was shitty, but because he was a Marxist and I wasn't.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous.
Well, I'll tell you what, I just figured out the fourth podcast we're going to have, Nicky, and it's about culture. So I don't know if you know, I'm a half Israeli, and my father's from Israel. And so I have a lot of Middle East in me. I'm actually, in fact, I'm an Israeli citizen, dual U.S. Israeli citizen. And so
fantastic.
I understand very well the Middle Eastern culture, because even though the Jews and the Muslims, the Jews and the Arabs hate each other, we're basically cousins. We're kind of cut from the same cloth. And so, and I understand the culture and the battle, the fight that you don't give up. In the Middle East, you don't just say, okay. I mean, I think here in the West, we have a tendency to kind of defer to big government. Whereas in Middle Eastern culture, you never defer to anybody. You fight for what's right. And we could have a long discussion because, look, obviously, I'm sure you know, we just had the election here in the United States and Trump was elected and a whole bunch of people scream, celebrities and big names like, if Trump's elected, I'm leaving the country.
Good, leave.
Exactly. And it's always interesting to me because I know what it's like in the rest of the world. I know what you talked about earlier about the freedoms in Canada. Obviously, we have the same thing in the US. I know how great it is to live in a country where you can do whatever you want, say whatever you want, think whatever you want. And when these guys talk about leaving, going to some place, God forbid they go to the Middle East. God forbid that they go to some of the repressive countries out there, Africa, East Europe, wherever it is. I mean, it's terrifying. It's terrifying to live in a place where the government owns you, you know? And it's that culture that we know how to fight back, maybe as Middle Easterners, whereas Americans just, they take for granted all the freedoms and protections they have. And you and I, even though I grew up here, you and I don't. We understand it.
No, and I love the Trump, and I go to
if you love Ayn Rand, you definitely love Trump. There's no
I love the
question about
Trump.
that.
I love the Trump. He's the best. He's the greatest. I wrote a book that he endorsed.
Oh,
Did
wow.
you know that?
I did not know that.
So, my co-author is a famous conservative radio talk show host. His name is Wayne Allen Root. He's born Jewish, but he took Christ as his Lord and Savior about 15 years ago.
Okay.
And this
Oh, wow.
this little bubble says endorsed by President Donald J. Trump on
Wow.
Truth Social.
Okay.
So it's
What's the
pretty
book
cool.
about? Tell me about the book.
So it's one of 11 books I've written. This is called The Great Patriot Boycott Book. Myself and Wayne, we did not like the woke direction in which corporate America was going. So we wrote a book called The Great Patriot Protest and Boycott Book, which is a list of 116 woke companies for Americans to boycott. And we decided we should, write a book that's a boycott books, companies that are not woke to buy from.
Right.
So we put a list of 123 companies to buy from. Now, it's an incomplete list, and
Right.
there's Public Square has now come up with an online marketplace where pro-American companies can go and register themselves. So there's now thousands of them there. But this was a pretty cool book. The first 150 pages is basically content from Wayne and I. And then
What's
the
number
list,
one? What's the number one company to buy from with your
the Trump
ideology?
organization. The Trump organization, of course.
Well, something that'll be more like a little more consumer oriented that somebody can buy from.
Well, the Trump store has all kinds of stuff. It's kind of, it's high end and expensive, but they sell books, they sell apparel,
Golden
They
shoes. They sell golden shoes.
kitchen stuff, golden shoes, drinkware, glassware, bath and body, luggage, golf merchandise, and so forth. Then, My Pillow is in there, Mike Lindell's company. That's a pretty patriotic company.
Of course.
There's a store called the Great Patriot Store, which sells all the household products that you use, the consumables. Number 5 is In-N-Out Burger.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Number 5 is In-N-Out Burger.
So because they also have like a Christian psalm written on the underside of all of their cups, right? They still have that?
Yep,
Yeah,
they do.
yeah.
They have biblical verses on food packaging. It's amazing.
Yep. The
Number
Snyder
6
family.
is Hobby Lobby, the craft chain store. Number 7 is Getter, although I would probably change that now. But Getter was at the time an alternative to Twitter. This is before Twitter was bought by Musk. Actually, around when it was bought by Musk, but before we really understood what that meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number 8 is Real America's Voice TV. It's a conservative TV network. It's got, all the big hosts, guys like Wayne Allen Root, Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, all that good stuff. Bass Pro Shops. You familiar with Bass Pro Shops?
Of course, yes. All my outdoor needs, sure. For to eat some salmon.
Chick-fil-A.
Closed on Sundays. Yeah. I mean, you got the greatest hits there, I'm telling you.
Rumble, that's number 11. Number 12 is Goya Foods, which is a
Spanish Mexican
amazing
foods.
company,
Yeah.
Spanish Mexican foods.
Yeah.
Number 13 is Interstate Batteries. It sells automotive batteries.
Okay. Is Uline coming up? I got to believe Uline's in there pretty soon.
Uline's in there. I don't know if they're in the top 20. The
Okay.
Epoch Times, number 14. Number 15, the UFC under Dana White.
Yep.
16 is a company called Point Bridge Capital, which has the MAGA fund. These are the non-woke kind of stocks, the MAGA fund.
Didn't they just hire Don Jr.? I think they just hired Don Jr. like last week. He's going to some venture capital fund.
Well, there you go.
I keep
Then
on
there's
top of my conservative.
LL
friends.
Bean, LL Bean, the great American outdoor company.
Sure.
Emerson Knives. You familiar with Emerson Knives?
I'm not. I think I'm about to become though.
So this is an Emerson knife. Ernest Emerson is the inventor of the tactical folding knife, which was created by him for the United States Navy SEALs. And you may see that there is a little kind of like a wavy feature here on top of the knife here.
Mm-hmm.
What this allows you to do is if you have
Open
this,
liberals?
No.
Okay, sorry.
Any knife can let you do that. But if you put this knife in your pocket, as you're pulling it out, I'm going to show you. This thing's going to get caught on the pocket of the jean, and it's gonna self-deploy. By the time you pull it out, it's already deployed. You don't have to pull it out and then open it. It's pretty cool.
I like it. All right.
Yeah. So Emerson Knives is number 18. We'll just go to the top 20, and then number 19 is First Form. That's Andy Frisella's supplements company, and number 20 is Give Send Go, which is the conservative version of GoFundMe.
Okay.
So these are the top 20.
So it's pretty clear you're not voting for Trudeau in the next election, correct?
No.
Okay.
That's good.
All
Glad
right,
you
look,
guessed
I'm
that.
aware. I understand Canada's the 51st state. I know what's going on up there. Okay.
There you go.
So let's go back to you. Let's go back to your story. So we've gotten through, we got an A on the paper. Fuck that teacher. And now we're going past college. So what did you do? Did you become, I mean, you've obviously written a lot. Did you become a writer? What were you doing then?
When I finished university in Toronto, I went to I actually decided to do my master's, and I went to an Ivy League school. I went to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C.
Baby Ivy. Kind of not
Baby.
quite Ivy. Sorry. I'd love to give you the credit, Nicky, but you know.
They call themselves an Ivy League school. So
that's like a
there you
charge
go.
of $60,000 a year, but it's a great school.
Yeah.
Georgetown's a fantastic school, just not quite an Ivy, but that's okay.
So
For a Canadian, I'm sure it's an Ivy League. Shit, I mean, any school in the United States is an Ivy for a Canadian. I mean, let's be honest. Sorry, go ahead.
So I did my master's in the Foreign Service Program, which is the International Relations and Business Program.
They have the best foreign relations program in the country. Georgetown does. It's amazing. Yeah.
They do. So I went there, and 2 years. I did a 3.85 out of 4.0, so I did well.
Good number.
Yeah.
How'd you like living in Washington, D.C.? Were you young? I mean,
fucking loved it, man. It was, I lived next to the old Soviet embassy.
Oh, wow.
Wisconsin Avenue and 25th Street. It was wild. It was wild being there. The NSA, I think, was doing a lot of jamming over there. So like TVs and radios
Sure.
and shit didn't work properly.
Wait,
It
what
was
years
wild.
was it? What years were you there?
89 to 91.
Okay. So who's
Yeah.
that? That's Bush Senior was our
Bush the
president
Elder.
at the time.
Bush
Yeah.
the Elder was the president.
Yeah. Okay.
That was when the Berlin Wall fell, all that
Yeah.
cool stuff. It was fucking cool being in Georgetown at that time.
I mean, that must have been a crazy time to be in foreign relations with Eastern
It was.
Europe imploding and all the things that were going on. It must have been amazing.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I wanted to go work, in the United States in the foreign policy establishment, but being a Canadian was like a non-starter.
Yeah, and an Iranian. I mean, let's be honest.
When school was finished, I was a little bit lost. Took me for a year and a half. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. I took a bunch of odd jobs, and then I finally landed in a telecom company. Canada had opened up its telecom markets, and there were some competitors fighting against the monopolies. And the monopoly in Ontario, where I live, was Bell Canada.
Okay.
And this company was called Unitel. I started working for them, and I worked there for 4.5 years. But I got to tell you, man, I hated corporate.
Well, I bet they're pretty woke, super woke. Is my guess.
Right now they would be, but back then they were just corporate. There was a girl there who was the same age as me at the time. I was in my early 20s, southern girl from the U.S. and got friendly with her, but just friendly. There was no like sexual tension or anything like that. But I'm just walking across the room. She smiles, I smile. She goes, "Hi, Nicky," and I go, "Hi, hon." And this was 1990, and she's like, "Don't call me that."
Yeah.
I'm like,
I bet
what?
that's the first thing she said. Absolutely.
It was, but this was 93. This was before this had really become a thing, right?
Yeah.
She said, "That's sexist," and I go, I didn't mean to be sexist. I was just, you're Southern. I've got Southern relatives, like I do, and I'd spoken to her, told her I like my aunt married a Georgian, and I have Georgian.
Bless her heart.
Cousins and whatnot. She said, "Yeah, I understand, but we're not in the South." And it was one of the big shocks that I had. And it's one of the things that made me think, I don't want to be in this kind of fucking environment. This is bullshit.
Yeah.
But I stayed for a while, and then I joined another company, and I was there for a year. And then I went off to do an entrepreneurial thing with my father in Dubai. So I was in Dubai for a few months.
Oh, wow. But
This
back in
was
the 90s,
before,
Dubai was not, back then in the 90s, it's not what Dubai is today. I
no, not even
mean, it
close.
was a
It was
desolate
still
country.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was still a pretty cool place. But within a month of me going there, the price of oil crashed. And I mean crashed hard. This was 98,
Okay.
right? So it crashed from, I think, $27 a barrel to $4.50 a barrel. So the business that my dad was having me be in, there was no money. No one was buying anything at $4.50.
Is that what you guys were doing? You're buying and selling oil?
No, we weren't doing oil. Dad was involved in medical equipment. He would bring in hospital equipment to equip hospitals, basically, like anything and everything. And there was a sanctions against Iran.
Yeah.
So American companies that he dealt with for decades were not able to do business with him.
Yeah.
But everybody knew, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, that you could sell to Dubai and then turn around from Dubai and Dubai'd sell it to Iran. And that's how it happened. And, everybody knew it was happening. It wasn't, a big deal. Even the government kind of ignored it because it was hospital equipment. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're not going to, not only who cares, it could look really fucking bad
Yeah.
if the US government said, you know what?
Yeah, no
Let
more
people die, goddammit.
no more
Let people
penicillin for the
die.
world. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
let little kids and babies die. Yeah, that's not going to work, man. That's not going to work. So they left that alone. But Iran couldn't buy anything. Dubai couldn't buy anything, and then Iran couldn't buy anything. So it was doubly.
Yeah, I think the business plan was a little bit off with your dad. But yeah, look, you try, you get out there, you try.
It was timing. Like if we'd have done it a year later, it would have flourished.
Yeah.
A year later, it was great. So because it didn't work, I was not able to stay there. He was not able to fund me, and I was not able to stay there on my own. You could not at that time work in Dubai. I'd have to get a company to sponsor me. It was a whole big deal. So I just said, fuck it, I'm going back to Canada. And I did. I went back to Canada. And within 3 months, I got another telecom job in sales. So I was not wanting to get a sales job, but it was the only job I could land at that time. Because my jobs before were more business development rather than pure sales. Like it was like I would go work with partners and try to get them to agree to open a door.
You weren't ready to start cold calling? It wasn't in your plan?
No, it wasn't a thing. Like I was hoping to get a job like I used to have, and nope, nobody wanted to give me one of those. So I took a sales job, and I was scared shitless. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was scared shitless of selling.
Can I tell you real quick, like a real
scared.
quick story? So I was a lawyer. I am a lawyer still, and I was a lawyer, and I had been a lawyer for like 5 or 6 years. And my brother somehow convinced me to join our family business, which was a sales organization. And I'd spent the last 5 years being a lawyer with suits and ties and very well respected, making a lot of money. And somehow he convinced me. And I basically said, all right, fuck it, let's do it. Let's see what happens. I show up the first day, he hands me a phone, and he goes, go. I'm like, what do you mean go? He's like, start selling shit. Fucking here's a list of numbers, start calling. And that's what I had to do. I literally got on the phone and I started calling people to sell. We were selling memory at the time, computer memory. This is back like in the mid 90s when 64 megs would be like $2,500, right? And crazy, right? But that's what I did. And I got on the phone. And let me tell you something. The best thing I've ever done in my life was spend a year cold calling people. Because when you have to just pick up, back then, you had to pick up a phone, dial a number, somebody picked up, and you just had to make them like you. And that has like set the tone and the course of literally my entire life after that. Like my ability to socialize, to talk, to be in conversations, to do 90% of things I do now is because I spent a year learning how to talk to people. So yeah. I don't know if you had the same experience, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but for me, cold calling was great.
I went and I kind of knocked on businesses' doors, literally.
Right.
And yeah, it forced me to get better at that. So here's an incredible thing that happened. Between Christmas and New Year's of 1998, I was transferred to an acquisition company that telecom company had bought. It was an internet company, and the owner of that company, he was in an earnout, so he was still there. He and I got along, and I became one of his salespeople. And I still hated it,
right.
But I kept doing it, got better at it, hated it less. And then between Christmas and New Year's, the mothership company had told everybody, hey, you have this off. But Buddy said, no, you don't. You're working. And I was pissed.
Right.
But I came. And a fellow walked in the door and said, "Hey, I need to buy an e-commerce solution. Do you guys have one?" And we did. It was really cheap. So I sat and I talked with him. I said, "Yeah, what are you doing? What do you need it for?" I said, here it is. Here's the cost, $27 a month. He said, "Okay, I'm going to buy it." I said, "Cool." It was a small sale. It's not a big deal, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Then he said, "But you know, I kind of like you and I'm going to trust you. I'm actually here on behalf of beer.com. His name was Ross Morley. And beer.com at the time in 98 was looking to do the world's first live stream from a bar.
Oh my God.
Nobody had done a live stream in 1998.
No
You
shit.
understand?
I mean, that was unfucking believable at the time. I can't even
So he
imagine.
said, do you think your people can do it?" I said, "I don't know, but I'll find out. I'll tell you the truth." So I went to the head of development, who was a man named Vicky. It's interesting. He was an Indian man. I
Okay.
think it's Vikram, and everybody called him Vicky.
Yeah.
And he was an asshole. Like, he was a dick. Like, he was a first class asshole. And he was like speaking disdainfully to me. And I said, "Look, I met with this guy, sold him this. He's asking us if we can do this. Can we?" And he just looked at me. He said, "We can, but it's going to take this long and it's going to cost this much." And I said, "Okay." So I went over to Ross and I said, "Hey, Ross, they said we can do it, but it's going to take this long and it's going to cost this much." And this much was 200 grand. And he thought, he silenced me, shut me up. Ross said, "Yeah, that's in the budget. No problem." He said, "Can we go meet the guy?" So I brought him in and met him. And the guy was freaking out because beer.com was owned by Canada's largest brewer at the time, Labatt's,
Oh, wow.
who's been bought by Interbrew since and all
Yeah.
that good stuff. And anyways, the size of the project went up to 500K, which, in
In
today's dollar,
98, that's like, I mean, today that'd be
5
like
million
$18
today.
billion, telling you.
It'd be 5 million today for
Yeah.
sure. The fellow who used to own the company that he was now the head of the division of came up to me and said, "Is this for real?" And I said, "It seems to be." My boss, who was a total douchebag, Bill fucking Dickinson, total douchebag, hated my guts. I hated his guts. He freaked because I was about to make him a superstar with that $500,000 deal. And he went from hating my guts to loving my guts.
Totally. You kidding? It's
I
amazing.
mean, just like kissing my butt and the whole bit. The deal got done, but I was recruited away from that company by another company for a lot more money. And I took the job.
Nicky, I got to tell you, I think you might actually be the world's best podcast guest because we've been going for 40 minutes. We haven't even come close to whatever it is you do now, just throwing stories around and talking about your life, growing up. I mean, that's awesome. I'm like fascinated with all of it. We're going to have to do a volume 2 of this. I'll tell you, before we go, because 40 minutes usually might end. Give me like a quick 2-minute summary of who you are today and what you do. And then when we come back to volume 2 of this podcast later on, we'll get into more detail.
So, Dan, what I do is I help entrepreneurs, usually that are solopreneur types or maybe got 1 or 2 staff, like under a couple million a year in sales. I help these folks make a shit ton more money. I'm really fucking good at it. I show them how to sell, because a lot of them don't know how to sell. They're scared of selling. I show them how to overcome objections. I'm extremely good at that. I show them how to also take that innate expertise that they've developed through whatever number of years they've been living and turn it into commercial thought leadership so they can use that to attract their ideal clients to themselves. And the line about me being the world's greatest podcast guest, I gave myself that title.
Well, it's clearly true. So, it's fine.
Yeah,
No problem.
It's the reason it's true, brother, is because I've been on close to 670 podcasts in 2.5 years. So I've done the fucking reps.
I don't feel so special being number 671, Nicky. I got to tell you.
But I'll tell you this. This is the first time I've gone on a show where I've actually not spoken at all about what I do until the host says, "You better tell me what you do." Because usually that comes out in the first few minutes. But I said, you know what, let's run with this time. And I help these guys make a ton more money. My father was a man who was an entrepreneur, and he loved people, and he gave of himself to people. If you knew him and you didn't have work, he'd sit you down and call all his buddies till he got you a job. If you knew him and you were trying to start a business, he'd sit you down and give you really good advice because he was very smart. And he would also get you access to capital and even clients. And if you were a buddy of his and you were trying to buy a car or a house and the bank wouldn't give you enough to buy your dream car or home, he'd top you up with a loan and he'd never let you pay it back. If you tried to pay it back, he'd say, come on, man, get out of here.
Well, man, I love your dad. I love him.
He was the greatest of men. Honestly, it's an honor to be his son.
Yeah.
It's an honor to have his blood flowing through my veins. And he taught me, be there for people. Everybody needs someone to love them, to believe in them. And inside my business, I know a lot. I do a lot of cool shit. But my superpower is I believe in people. I love on them. If they're my kind of people, if the fit's there, I'll be there for them more than they're there for themselves. And the other thing is, like I did the Gallup Strengths Finder test, my number one strength is getting into action for myself and getting people into action. So for people who need to make sales, make money, having a guy like me in their corner is super, super powerful because I will not let them off the hook until they're in action.
Yeah.
And it's why I've made a lot of people a lot of money.
You know, Nicky, usually I come to the end of the podcast. I'm so fucking excited to be done with the boring people that I sometimes have on the show. I'm like trying to figure out a way to stretch it out to 30 minutes so it's like legit. I love talking to you today. I love the way you tell stories. I love the way you talk. I love your enthusiasm. I mean, and I really do want to bring you back to talk about what you do because we obviously didn't talk about it at all. And I bet it's really inspiring and exciting. Where can people find you?
I am the only Nicky Billou on planet Earth. So if you type in @Nicky Billou on any social media platform, that's a good place. I also have 2 podcasts of my own. If you go on your favorite podcast platform and you type in @Nicky Billou, it'll show some of the episodes I've been on, but it'll also show my 2 podcasts. I have a business podcast about thought leadership called The Thought Leader Revolution, where I interview some of the world's top thought leaders, some very famous, some not so famous, but they're really, really incredible at what they do. And I also have a men's podcast called The Sovereign Man Podcast that's all about uplifting men, manhood, and masculinity. So,
well, Nicky, I've really, really enjoyed having you on today. I'm excited to have you on for volume 2 of this. I'm also excited about the 4 other podcasts we're going to do about culture and Iran and all the other different things.
I'd love to do those.
No,
straight up, that'd be fun.
For sure, we will. And I appreciate you coming out. And for everybody else, go, Nicky, spell your last name for me.
Billou. For
anybody who's interested in checking out Nicky Billou, go in to any Google, any browser out there, type in Nicky Billou, give Nicky a call. He's a cool dude, and we'll see you next time, Middle Age Mess. Thanks.